Religion in the ASEAN Region, a requirement for ASEAN 204 by Sherwin P. Wenceslao, Master of ASEAN Studies. The ASEAN region is a region of many faiths and religious traditions. Within the ASEAN region, all the major world religions coexist, often along national and ethnic lines. Individually, the countries in the ASEAN region are also home to various religions and faiths, stemming from the shared history and close and interconnected nature of the ASEAN countries. Consequently, 6 out of 10 countries within ASEAN have no official state religion in their respective constitutions. However, in the case of the countries in the region, most countries have a dominant or majority practiced religion, which is practiced by most of its people. It is notable that within ASEAN, the concept of having a state religion is ultimately de facto and guided by actual practice. There is no denying the continuing importance of religion in the ASEAN way of life. Geography and religions in the ASEAN region. The Southeast Asian region can be generally divided into 2 regions. Mainland Southeast Asia, comprising the countries of Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam, and Archipelagic or Maritime Southeast Asia, comprising the countries of Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Brunei. Santa Rita has said that geography molds the kind of life of the culture. In terms of religion, this can be clearly observed as in the religions that have taken hold in the Southeast Asian mainland and the archipelago. Mainland Southeast Asia. In mainland Southeast Asia, its proximity to India and China have resulted in the diffusion, adaptation, and localization of Indian and Chinese culture and religion. The predominance of Buddhism and formerly Hinduism in the Southeast Asian mainland can be seen as a result of centuries of close contact with the major civilizations of the Asian mainland. Historically, most of the ancient kingdoms in the area were either Hindu or Buddhist until fairly recent times. Until the present day, Buddhism continues to dominate mainland Southeast Asia. Cambodia. In the case of Cambodia, the majority 90% of its population identify as Buddhist, 2.3% identify as Muslim, 2.9% as Christian, and the remaining 4.8% as indigenous or religions. Theravada Buddhism is the predominant form of Buddhism in Cambodia. In ancient times, Hinduism was a significant presence in Cambodia. In the 7th to 13th century, the Khmer Empire ruled Cambodia as a powerful Hindu-Buddhist empire. That started as Hindu gradually incorporated Buddhism over time. The greatest legacy of this kingdom is the Angkor Wat, the city's capital and the largest religious monument in the world. The temple was originally constructed as a Hindu temple, which steadily transitioned into a Buddhist temple over time. Buddhism entered Cambodia around 10th century, and Theravada Buddhism became officially the state religion of the Kingdom of Cambodia in the 18th century. Islam may have entered Cambodia through trade links, while Christianity was brought to Cambodia by French missionaries. At present, Buddhism remains an important element of Cambodian identity. Buddhist stupas continue to dominate the landscape. Buddhist monks are deeply involved in education and culture, and there are established Buddhist monastic universities to facilitate the education and training of Cambodian monks. Moreover, Buddhist monks in Cambodia continue to be revered and involve themselves in social issues, politics, and government. Laos. The Lao People Democratic Republic has no official state religion. However, the majority or 66% of its population identify as Buddhist, 1.5% identify as Christian, and the remaining 31.5% as Satsanafai or Thai folk animist beliefs. All throughout Laos, there remain tribal communities which continue to practice indigenous animism and nature worship. Buddhism entered Laos around the 1st century through Indian merchants and prospered throughout the country until the 19th century. Buddhism is a significant element in the Lao identity, involving its social cohesion, culture, tradition, ideology, and beliefs of Lao people. There remain abundant examples of Buddhist-related art, sculpture, and architecture throughout the country of great historic and artistic value. Traditionally, Buddhism in Laos occupied a high place in Lao society, intending to the social welfare and spiritual needs of the people. Monks were depended upon by the community in advisory roles to provide education and counsel, administer rites, and reinforce social order. The temple was the social center where the people interacted and religion, politics, and government converged. Myanmar. In Myanmar, formerly Burma, there is no state religion. However, 89% of its population identify as Buddhist, 4% identify as Muslims, 4% as Christian, and the remaining 3% as other religions. Buddhism has always played a major role in Myanmar. Historically, Buddhism entered Burma in 250 BC, when King Ashoka, the Great of India, sent a religious mission to the legendary City of Gold, alleged to be situated near Thaton in Burma. Later, Burmese kingdoms, including the Pagan Kingdom in the 10th century and the Pegu Kingdom in the 4th century, were built on the foundations of Buddhism. These successive Burmese kingdoms officially supported Buddhism and involved themselves in various religious affairs. This legacy can still be seen in the predominance of ancient Buddhist temples and structures throughout Myanmar. This pattern continued until the advent of Western colonialism. However, the presence of Buddhism in Myanmar continues to be strong. Thailand. Thailand is the major Buddhist country in the Southeast Asian mainland. While the constitution guarantees the freedom of religion, Theravada Buddhism is a state religion, and 94.6% of its population identify as Buddhist, with the remaining 4.6% identifying as Muslim, 0.7% identifying as Christian, and 0.1% with other religions. Buddhism is deeply ingrained in Thai history and tradition. Since the Sukhothai era in the 11th century, the Thai kingdoms and their ruling families have all been Buddhist. The state provides support to Buddhism by providing robes, food, shelter, and medicine to monks and novices, who are regarded as the principal guardians of the religion and look after their other material needs. The state also contributes to the construction and maintenance of monasteries and patronize monastic educational activities. At times, members of the royal family have even been ordained as monks. Nowadays, the king, as the supreme patron of Buddhism in Thailand, appoints the governing body of religious affairs in the country. Buddhism has become so integrated with Thai life that the two are hardly separable. Buddhist influences can be detected in Thai lifestyle, mannerisms, traditions, character, arts, architecture, language, and all other aspects of the Thai culture. Vietnam. In the case of Vietnam, there is no declared state religion. Officially, 80.8% of the population profess other or no religion, stemming from the long communist influence in the country. However, Buddhism is still the most practiced religion at 9.3%, followed by Christianity at 7.3%. Historically, Buddhism was present in Vietnam as early as the 2nd century, which came to the country through trade routes with India and via China since the Tang dynasty ruled Vietnam for several hundred years until the 8th century. Upon gaining its independence until the colonial era, Vietnamese kings in successive dynasties have supported and maintained the Buddhist religion. By the 15th century, Buddhism fell out of favor to be replaced with Confucianism and later Taoism. It was not until the 19th century that Buddhism regained some stature under the Nguyen dynasty, who accorded royal support. With the coming of French colonization and the influence of Western religions and philosophies, Buddhism in Vietnam began to decline. However, Buddhism still pervades the thinking and behavior of Vietnamese people from all walks of life. Singapore. The small city-state of Singapore is officially a secular state and is comprised of 40.5% Buddhists, 14.9% Muslims, 14.6% Christians, 4% Hindus, and 28% other religions. Due to its unique history as a trading center and long experience with British colonization, Singapore is composed of many peoples, such as Indians from the British colonies, Chinese traders, and native Malays. As such, there is a broad mix of religions in Singapore. In pre-colonial times, the Chinese established footing in Singapore and brought Mahayana sect Buddhism, which was widely practiced and continues to be the religion of the majority of the population. Unlike most countries in Southeast Asia, Hinduism continues to be a significant minority in Singapore. Hinduism was brought to Singapore through the relocation of populations from India by the British colonial government. Islam is a significant presence in Singapore. Islam was introduced as early as the 13th century by Arab traders. Christianity has also prospered in Singapore, in part due to conversion and the presence of various Western expatriates in the country. Maritime Southeast Asia. Recalling Santa Rita in that geography molds the kind of life of the culture, it is notable that in the maritime Southeast Asia, sea trade paved the way for Arab traders to introduce Islam, which, to the exception of the Philippines, dominates the region to this day. In pre-colonial archipelagic Southeast Asia, large Islamic sultanates developed. In modern-day Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei are the region's majority Muslim countries, with Indonesia being the world's largest Muslim country. Christianity also brought to the region via sea. When Europeans began the colonization of the region in search of valuable trade goods. Consequently, most of the archipelagic Southeast Asia is dominated by Islam, or in the case of the Philippines, Christianity. Malaysia. Malaysia is comprised of 61.3% Muslims, 19.8% Buddhists, 9.2% Christians, 6.3% Hindus, and 11.3% other religions. While not officially a Muslim state, a form of Sunni Islam is racially associated with the Bumiputras, or the sons of the soil, which are ethnic Malays which have policies favored by national government. Consequently, race, religion, and identity in Malaysia are significantly intertwined. Islam entered peninsular Malaysia through Arab maritime traders sometime during the 12th century. In the 13th century, the Kingdom of Malacca prospered, becoming a center of maritime trade. Arabian merchants continued to arrive in the region, who converted the native Malay sultanates from Buddhism to Islam. From this time, the role of sultan was both a political and religious office. In the present day, Islam as the dominant religion of ethnic Malays came to be highlighted as a pillar of Malay identity. While its founding principles are committed to a moderate Islamic state, there has been increasing Islamization in laws and government. While British colonialism disrupted the old order and introduced new peoples, including Buddhists, Christians, and Hindus, the predominance of Islam in Malaysia continues to be strong. Indonesia. Indonesia, the largest country in the region, is comprised of 80.3% Muslims, 16% Christians, 1.9% Hindus, and 5.2% other religions, including Buddhists. Indonesia is notable in the majority Muslim Pancasila, or the Five Principles, meaning the official philosophical foundation of the Indonesian state, does not designate a state religion but recognizes six religions: Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Confucianism, with traditional and animist religions classified under Hinduism. Pancasila is comprised of the following inseparable principles: 1. Belief in the one and only God. 2. Just and civilized humanity. 3. The unity of Indonesia. 4. Democracy guided by the inner wisdom in the unanimity arising out of deliberations amongst representatives. And 5. Social justice for all of the people of Indonesia. The principle was brought about by the nation's founders in order to pull together a diverse archipelago composed of different peoples and religions. Consequently, at the present day, Indonesia celebrates the various religions in the country with aspirations towards a secular society. An example of this is in Bali, one of the few areas in Southeast Asia where Hinduism continues to be the majority religion. However, there have been constant movements towards the desecularization of Indonesian society and criticizing Pancasila for being too secular and inclusive, diluting the predominance of Islam in Indonesia. In recent years, an increase in democratic participation in Indonesia, as in the case of the downfall of Suharto in 1998, did not lead to increased secularization, but instead to greater involvement of Islamist organizations and elites to assert Islamic policies through formal democratic and legislative channels. Ultimately, in Indonesia's case, there remains an emphasis on nationalist rather than religious foundations for the state, and there remains broad support from the government towards moderate forms of Islam. Brunei. In the case of Brunei, 67% of its population identify as Sunni Muslims, 13% identify as Mahayana Buddhist, 10% as Christian, and the remaining 10% as other religions, including Hindu and other local tribal beliefs. Islam entered the Bruneian kingdom through trade during the 15th century, which persisted until the colonial era when Brunei became a British protectorate. Notably, while significant fractions of Brunei's diverse population identify as non-Muslim, Islam continues to be the official religion supported by the royalty and state in Brunei. The Philippines. The Philippines is the only majority Christian country in ASEAN. It is comprised of 89% Christians, 5% Muslims, and 6% other religions, including Buddhists. In line with the rest of archipelagic Southeast Asia, the Philippines was once majority Muslim. However, as a result of over 400 years of Spanish colonization, the Philippines is now a majority Christian country. The Philippines does not have a national religion, however. Christian remains features permeate the country, and Christian values influence state laws and policies. Talisaynon, for example, notes that the fear of God has been identified as an express national value. Numerous Catholic churches are present throughout the country, and Christian holidays, festivals, and beliefs are a way of life. In this case, while there is technically a separation between church and state, the majority religion is the de facto religion in the country. Some of the pre-Christian and indigenous religions have persisted in the present day, particularly in the isolated highlands and in southern Mindanao, which was never fully controlled by the Spanish. Overall, ASEAN's aspirations toward a multicultural and multi-faith region in some ways contrasts with the national character of religion among the ASEAN states. The ASEAN region is a region of ethnic and religious diversity, while religions are also factor into questions of national identity and character. As ASEAN continues its march towards a united community and greater social and cultural interconnectedness, the peaceful coexistence of its major religions, as well as continued survival of the region's indigenous religions, will be a continued challenge for ASEAN in the years to come. Thank you. References: Santa Rita Jose, Lecture of Southeast Asia as a Cultural Region, last accessed on 3 September 2015. K.S. Charles et al., eds. Editors, Asian Visions of Authority, Religion and the Modern State of East and Southeast Asia. Honolulu, University of Hawaii Press, 1994. Hamayutsu Kikuwe, Democracy and Religious Pluralism in Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Malaysia Compared, Department of Political Science, Northern Illinois University. Barrow, Robert, and McCleary, Rachel. Which countries have state religions? Harvard College and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Quarterly Journal of Economics, November 2005. Talisayon Serafin, Filipino Values, Chapter 8, Teaching Values in the Natural and Physical Sciences in the Philippines, 1990. CIA World Factbook.